Hi, welcome to another FinApp session. And today's one is a little more important than the rest because it's also going to be addressing a very crucial part of your business, which is compliance and regulation. Yes, you guessed it right. Today we are going to talk about the risk profiling. Okay, so let me just take a step back and give you the context of why this is more important from a compliance perspective. I'm sure you all would have heard about the SAP circular that has come up in April 2026, which is nothing but to ensure that every client needs to be not just about risk profile, but also we will have to ensure the portfolio suitability. There has to be a match between the portfolio risk profile and the client risk profile. And the scheme also has got to be matching as per the AMFI riskometer and so on and so forth. Now, this is definitely putting a lot of pressure on the financial intermediaries, and the regulator is actually going pretty strict about it. And the reason why I'm saying that there is a pressure is because that there is no single system today that is actually matching the portfolio risk profile with the personal risk profile. Because I'm sure that you all would agree that our clients would have transacted with us over a different period of time. Some of the clients that you would have probably will have decades of relationships, and it is very difficult for now to be ensuring, or for us to be even matching, forget ensuring, but for us to be even getting onto a matching process of where does the risk profile stand and then where does the portfolio risk profile stand. At FinApp, we have taken this up very, very seriously, and we are on a mission in terms of help our MFD partners, RIA partners, to at least get to the point where they can match the portfolio risk profile and the personal risk profile and see what all are the matches, what all are the mismatches, and also take the corrective action. Okay, so I'm going to be taking you through the entire process of risk profiling as a first place, and then also take you in terms of the functionalities as well. Okay, so here you are in actually a FinApp login. This is the RM login. The first step that I'm going to be taking you is in terms of how do you create a client and how do you sort of do the risk profiling aspect. It is a very, very simple and seamless process that we've sort of adopted. So in the RM login, you come to this placeholder called as onboarding. You just create a client with this basic details. I'm just creating a dummy client here. I call it as a risk profiling test demo, and I'm just have to give an email ID and a mobile number. Create the client. That's it. Now you can see that the client account is created, and we just come back to the my client section, and from here I will just access this client, and this is the client that we sort of just created at the moment. Click on access and come to this place called as risk profile here. Okay, let me just drag my photo. Okay, come to the risk profile. So as you can see that there is a list of questions which are already populated. So what you're now doing from a flow perspective, as an advisor, as an RM, you've created a client, and then you're accessing the client account, and you've come to the risk profile as a module. That's what you've done. Okay, and so you have two options here. One is to fill the risk profiling questionnaire on behalf of the client while you're sort of having a conversation with the client directly or on Zoom meeting, wherever it is. You sort of help them in terms of filling it up, or otherwise you can simply share it with the client. Okay, so I'm going to be taking you to that the second flow where you're actually going to be shared with the client. So you just have to just click on this particular button, and it says that this profile client shared. Okay, what I'm going to be now doing is I'm hopping over to the client email and see whether I've actually received an email or not. So you can see that this is the client email that I put out. So I can see that it is uh, taking the client to that particular. Sorry, there is a email that has come to the client from FinApp, and the client have to just say click here to login. Okay, and they also have to do a validation by verifying the OTP, which would have come now. Your risk profile OTP is 732595. So as a user or as a client, I'm actually inputting the OTP 1732595, verify OTP. Now the client is able to perform the risk profile from his own machine, from his own system at a time that is actually convenient for them, right? So, and in order to make this particular process more intuitive, more interesting for them to be, because otherwise of course everybody knows that this profile, that particular exercise is a very tedious, and hence a boring process. So in order to make it much more intuitive, we've also come out with a video explainer, and then the user can video and sort of get explanation for every questions that the user is actually, the client is actually going to be seeing. Okay, so every question is explained in a very simple and seamless manner. The client just have to sort of just pick up one of the options and then move on with the rest. Okay, I'm not going to be getting into this particular process completely on my demo video because it's a very very lengthy process of doing that particular thing. So I'm just coming back, for the interest of time, coming back to the login that you sort of created for the client here. So once the client performs the risk profile, we sort of just come here. Yeah, once the client is performed the risk profile, they will get an acknowledgement on the screen itself saying that the report will be shared by the advisor. Okay, so think of it like this: you are just sharing a link with the client. The client performs the risk profile at a time that it is convenient for them, and for their easy understanding, we put out the videos as well. They're probably going to be taking about 7 to 10 minutes max to max in order to sort of perform that risk profile. And once the risk profile is completed, you will be getting an alert, and then you will be able to see the report as well as the portfolio suitability aspects and so on and so forth. Okay, that's what you're going to be doing. So now I will take you to a client account wherein the risk profile is already done, and I'm going to be taking you through the other aspects which are very, very important. Okay. So I'm just coming back to the RM login and searching a client for whom we've already done the risk profiling. Okay. And if I click on access, now you're going to be seeing a very very important aspect here. See this: risk stats, personal risk score, and portfolio risk score. And now this is the most important big picture single digit or single value summary that's going to be giving an idea about where does the client stand as far as their client portfolio stand as far as the risk profile is concerned. Now, personal risk profile score is nothing but the consolidated score that the client is getting after filling the questionnaire. Okay, and there are very scientific aspects about the way that we've also constructed the question. I will come to that in a minute. uh, Portfolio risk score is nothing but the risk score that he is getting based on the underlying portfolio. Very simple. Now, how have we arrived on that particular thing? Every mutual fund, at the moment, obviously, we are only doing it for the mutual fund. Uh, every mutual fund which is being held by the client is risk scored. Okay, let's say starting from zero point 0.6 and then goes up till about 10. So zero point 0.6 to 10, 10 being the highest, zero point 0.6 being the lowest. Every mutual fund is risk scored, and we take a weighted average score of the current portfolio that the client is holding. Now, the portfolio can come in from multiple sources, as you know. One could be a PDF, CAS, or it could be from the RTA files, or it can be even from MF Central. The moment the portfolio is processed, the portfolio risk score is populated, and the moment the risk profile questionnaire is filled by the client, the personal risk score is also populated. So this particular score is going to be giving you one quick bird's eye view kind of a model where is there a match or a mismatch. As you can see that there is a great mismatch over here, because the personal risk score is only coming up to 47.4, whereas the portfolio risk score is coming to 70. So there is a great amount of mismatch. So let's dive into where exactly are the mismatches and what is supposed to be done over here. Okay, so I'm taking you to the risk profile thing. As you can see that the client has already done the risk profile, and the advisor can sort of review the questions, review the options, etc., etc. All of that particular thing is done. And the good part is we are also able to show the client that on what all dates in the past have they done their risk profile. They will also be able to generate and compare a report or a particular questionnaire that the client has filled up in the past, which essentially means that you will actually be able to travel along with the client's journey in terms of the changes, if at all. Which means that you can even quiz back to the client. Let's say that the client has actually made a change in the decision or made a change in the option as compared to what it was 6 months ago. What was the rationale behind it? Because many a times in our observations what we've seen here is the clients advisors are very very serious about compliance, and they would want their clients to be filling the risk profile. But on the other side, clients take it very lightly. They think that it is just a formality, and they don't really put their mind or apply their mind while answering the questions. Okay, and because of that they sort of just do it for a formality basis and without really applying the mind, like I said. And of course it's like garbage in garbage out, the report is not going to be accurate. But here is now a chance for our MFD partners, RIA partners, to sort of even interrogate to that extent, I would say, that what are the changes that the client has actually made in the respective questions or options, and investigate or even quiz them why is that they made such a choice. Okay. So this is the questionnaire, and the questionnaire again, it's very very important for you to know that we've constructed the way that we've constructed the risk profile, which I'll sort of explain it via the report. You see that this is a three-dimension risk profile, as we call it. Okay, and the three-dimension risk profile is nothing but risk capacity, risk tolerance, and risk required, which is the three dimensions of risk profile as a term, which is like an umbrella term, as I keep saying. Now, risk capacity is very different as compared to risk tolerance and risk required, or rather, three of the things are very much different and unique in itself. Risk capacity means the ability of somebody to take the risk, and it is, we call it as more like a objective kind of a risk model, because it's fairly easy for us to find out the capacity of a person, because it deals with income, it deals with net worth, the kind of dependence that he has, the number of dependents, etc., etc. So, of course, an HNI and ultra HNI would have much more capacity to absorb the risk as compared to somebody who's at an early stage, right? So, risk capacity is easy to find out, it's objective. But when we come to risk tolerance, it is also called as a willingness to take risk, and that's very tricky for us to find out. Not just for us, but in general, it's also called as a psychometric aspects. There are more number of questions to it, but still very difficult to find out because it deals with the client's attitude towards risk. Okay, and in our experience, it keeps changing as well, because in, let's say, think of it like this: in a bull market, everybody becomes risk seeking and their tolerance level goes up because they see sort of returns everywhere, people making money everywhere, and they're much more willing to take risks during such situations, whereas in a bear market it is just the opposite. Okay, so risk tolerance, we call it as subjective risk, much more difficult to sort of find out, has more questions to it, deals with the psychometric aspects. So these are the two major components of risk profile that exist across the system. But we've also introduced the most important aspect, which is called as risk required. Now here, why am I saying it is the most important aspect? Because it's extremely contextual and personal, and it is actually the most objective trait in the risk profiling. Because risk required deals with the returns that one needs to generate in order to achieve the financial goals. Okay, which means that, let me just try to explain that with an example. uh, let's assume that somebody just got to generate about 5% or 6% to achieve the financial goals. What is then the need in terms of getting onto the equity assets or volatile assets? If the financial goals can be achieved with as little as 6%, he might as well put the money into fixed income or something like a low volatile asset, right? So the risk required is the most objective, it's much more contextual, it's much more personalized, and this is a new addition that we have made, and which is why we call it as a three dimension risk profile. Okay, and the good part is we are actually showing in the report that where does the client stand as far as risk capacity, risk tolerance, and risk required is concerned. And obviously after that there is a composite, which is nothing but a weighted average of capacity, tolerance, and risk required, right? This is the final risk score that we will actually be considered, but still we would still be able to see that the capacity, tolerance, and risk required in a distinct manner as well. Okay. One more small thing before I jump on to the portfolio suitability aspect. You see something called as a self-assessment and a system assessment, right? The real beauty part of this particular thing is not just from a compliance point of view, it is also going to be helping you in terms of having a very, very engaging, intuitive conversation with the client on this particular aspect. So self-assessment is nothing but what the client think about themselves, and system assessment is basically talking about what they actually are based on the options that they've given on the multiple questions. Okay, now in our experience, in this case we've just given the dummy as 20 percentage, or it's turned out to be conservative. But in our experience, people rate themselves very high when it comes to the risk capacity. They think that more capacity is something which is sort of probably more ideal or something of that sort. Maybe it's a psychological trait, but In reality, once they start filling the questions in terms of their income, their expenditure, their dependence, their net worth, etc., they turn out to be far lesser than what they think they themselves are. Okay, which means that there is always a stark contrast between what they think they are and what they actually are, and which is going to be giving a great powerful engagement discussion model, because that is an insight which you can actually throw it up to the client and have a very interesting conversation with the client, which is why I said that it's a great engagement or a conversation starter. Okay, so we're not stopping there. We're not just talking about the different reports and the composite one. We're also giving certain observations. I'm not going to be getting into details with it, but an observations on different traits in terms of comfort zone and risk taking, certainty versus uncertainty, and all of it, because these are things that we are trying to find out, because we ask questions from a similar framework but phrased differently, and we try to understand whether the clients are actually consistent in terms of answering, or having a consistent view on these kind of frameworks. And if there is an inconsistency, we sort of pick it up. So for example, we have something called as a lifestyle. Okay, so we call it as generic lifestyle basis. You seem to have a balanced approach for this client. So think of it like this: a client's balanced approach on lifestyle, but then on the financial assets, he might be more aggressive. So that's actually a mismatch. So these are certain nuances, micro things, which is going to be helping in terms of understanding the client psyche much more detail, and like have the conversations and stuff like that. And the good part over here is that the client can put in a comment, advisor can put in a comment, the client will be able to sort of approve it digitally. So we have sort of completely covering it from a compliance aspect, and digitally stored, etc., can be retrieved at any point in time. All of those compliance aspects have been taken care of. Okay, now let me take you to the most important part, and which is the critical component that I was actually talking about, which is called as portfolio suitability. Okay, now this portfolio suitability, like I was mentioning before, is not being covered by any system at this point in time. Okay, this is the only system that we're having currently from a uh, portfolio suitability aspect perspective. Now we're starting with an overview, which is nothing but where does the client stand from a risk profile point of view, which is in this case is balanced. What is a portfolio risk profile which is moderately aggressive, basis points. Now you can see that it is actually denoted in red. Now this is very very simple and straightforward. This is nothing but the difference between the personal risk score, which is 53.25, and the portfolio risk score, which is 70. The difference between that, or the portfolio risk score, is actually higher, which is why there is called as a threat gap. In case if it was reverse, for example, if the personal risk score is actually higher portfolio risk score, then it would actually be an opportunity. So think of it like this: that the portfolio risk score is come out to be, let's say, 40, whereas the personal risk score is turned out to be 75, which means that the client's investments in a much more low risky, or a much more conservative kind of a mode, and therefore there is an opportunity for us to be increasing the allocations into more risky assets, etc. So there are two things: one is a threat gap, another one is an opportunity gap. In this case, it is a threat gap. Okay, now this is very very important. There is a suitability breakdown from a summary point of view. The client is holding about 19 schemes here. Okay, and out of the 19 scheme, one scheme is suitable, three schemes are not. Under risk as in, it is actually, he's taken more conservative funds than his risk profile. And there are 14 schemes, which is 78% of the portfolio. From a number of schemes perspective, it is unsuitable, meaning that is a couple of notches above the risk profile of the user, which is something that I'm going to be showing you in a minute. Okay, so this is an overview, and once the overview is done, I'm sort of just taking you in terms of asset allocation. Now this is very important. So we're giving you a bird's eye view with overview, and then again another bird's eye view in terms of, if there is a mismatch or a mismatch from an asset allocation point of view. As you can see, that the equity allocation is recommendation for this particular client as per the risk profile is 47%, but whereas the current allocation is 61.08 percentage, and therefore it is a breach. Okay, and this is something that I would want to spend just about a minute more. Now you might be wondering that how did we arrive at this particular asset allocation, and where does this particular figure come from? Fixed income 53 and equity 47. Now this is also coming in from a proprietary algorithmic model, which is again customizable and configurable by you as an MFD or an RIA in the backend. This configuration is, we call it as 4D. Okay, so while in the risk profile, I was actually talking about 3D, three dimension. When it comes to the portfolio, we're calling 4D, and the four dimensions are nothing but the risk tolerance, required, which are the three dimension of risk profile, and then we add one more question, which is called as a time horizon. Okay, so we've used a proprietary 4D portfolio modeling or a 4D portfolio builder in order to ascertain the right allocation. So think of it like this: it is not just driven by the risk tolerance or risk capacity, which is typically how the conventional models have actually been built. We're going one step ahead and then get into a very, very customized allocation model based on the time horizon as well, along with the risk required, and therefore comparing that with the most contextual recommended allocation with the current allocation. Okay, a similar approach is also being taken from the fund category point of view. So, what is going to happen is you will actually have a configured portfolio in the backend based on the 4D model, and that portfolio will be taken, from a comparison perspective, and then compare it with the current portfolio of the client. Okay, that's how the matches of, or the match or the mismatch, whatever, at an asset allocation fund category is going to be done. And then finally we come to scheme level. In the scheme level, it is much more straightforward and simple. We'll have to just compare the risk score of that particular fund, which is defined by the Amphi riskometer, with the client risk profile score, and then based on that we will say that it is unsuitable, 4 levels above risk profile. If it is under risk, so obviously because it's a floating rate fund and therefore is under risk, whereas the first fund is a global fund and it is 4 levels above the risk profile. When it comes to, let's say, large and mid cap, it is again unsuitable, but only 2 levels above the risk profile. So we're going into extremely uh, detailed kind of a mode in order to sort of really cover from a compliance perspective, and give a very detailed, very nuanced, and at the same time easy to understand report for you as a financial intermediary, and as well as for your client, and obviously needless to say from the regulatory aspect as well. So if you actually just zoom out and then think about the way that we've constructed the risk profiling ecosystem, is that one, they made it super easy for you to sort of complete the risk profiling aspect by just creating a client and sharing a link. Okay, the client receives the link on the email, does the OTP verification, and then they will actually be able to perform the risk profile at a time that is absolutely convenient for them. And in order to help them do that in a much more prominent manner, we also have explainer videos at every question. Okay, the moment they have done the risk profiling, you get a report, the client will also be getting an email on it. Once you get the report, you will, and if the portfolio is available for the client, you will actually be able to see the report as well as do the portfolio suitability aspect as well. Okay, and once this is done, you will be able to sort of share your comments, and then automatically there is another email that's going to be going to the client with the report and your comments, etc., etc. Okay, now the next part is obviously in terms of the suggestions, or the rectification that one has to be making, once there is a mismatch. That is for another video, which is another, or rather which is different module, that we call it as portfolio optimization. So which is already built in, but then I don't want to sort of cover it in the current video because it's already pretty long. Any questions that you have on the risk profiling, as always, please get in touch with our relationship manager or do write to us. We're always there to help you, not just from a compliance point of view, which is what we have covered here, but also from a great client engagement and a business development perspective as well. Thank you so much for watching this.